Ragnarok is the 17th installment in the ever-expanding Marvel Cinematic Universe and the third installment in the Thor trilogy of films. Directed by Taika Waititi, the film stars Chris Hemsworth, Tom Hiddleston, Cate Blanchett, Tessa Thompson, Anthony Hopkins and Karl Urban. Now, going into this film, I was very excited, not only because I'm a big Marvel movie fan and I get, super excited for every Marvel movie, but the trailers for this film I absolutely loved. And of course, all the reviews came out and pretty much everyone loved it. Like, the critics are loving this film. Pretty much everyone has put out a positive review, and coming out, I can most certainly see why. And I absolutely love Thor Ragnarok. And I'm probably becoming a little bit of a broken record at this point because I don't really dislike any movie Marvel has ever put out. And that's not because I'm a blind Marvel fanboy, it's because they're just consistently putting out great movie after great movie. And sure, not every movie they put out has been an absolute smash hit, but for me, Marvel has yet to put out a bad movie. Thor the Dark World and Iron Man 2 are probably the weakest, or most definitely the weakest films they put out, but I still think they're kind of watchable, entertaining movies. They're not like horrendously bad, awful, terrible films. I mean, I don't really watch them that often, I haven't watched them in years, but I don't think they're terrible films. However, Thor the Dark World, the second Thor film, probably is the weakest film Marvel's put out. Like I said, it's not terrible, but it's pretty bland, it's pretty forgettable, it's pretty underwhelming. So they really needed to deliver something quite memorable with this film. And similar to how kind of Skyfall really brought the kind of Bond franchise back after Quantum of Solace, this kind of does the similar kind of thing with Ragnarok after The Dark World. Because, The Dark World wasn't that great, but this film has just so much kind of energy and life to it, and it really provided a much needed boost to the Thor universe. Now, one of the things I like most about this film, and a lot of people are saying that this is so completely different from the other two Thor movies, and it is really kind of drastically different in tone from the previous two. But what I really liked about this film is that it found a way to kind of pay respect and homage to the previous two films, while still at the same time being very much its own film. Like, this is so completely different from the previous two. It really stands on its own and it's completely its own film. But also, if you'd seen the previous two, it kind of honours those and pays respect to those, and there's certain moments throughout this film where it pays homage to the previous two films, or kind of references something that we saw in the previous films. And I really like that, because I thought it was going to completely disregard those first two movies entirely. And I wouldn't have hated them if they did that, but at the same time I love the fact that they did still acknowledge those previous two films and pay respect and homage to those original two films, while still making a movie that was very much its own self-contained film that didn't really have anything to do with the previous two, but yet it still acknowledged that those two movies happened, and it still referenced and paid homage to events in those films, which I really liked. And in fact, the opening 5 minutes of this film probably is my favourite opening 5 minutes of any Marvel movie we've ever had. I mean, I have to think about that, but it's just such an awesome opening 5 to 10 minutes there. The scene that opens this film is just so awesome. It's a really great fight scene. It has some of the coolest visuals we've ever seen in the MCU, but although it was kind of radically different in tone from the get-go, and I mean from like the first frame, it's almost Deadpool-esque at the beginning there. But what I really loved about this fight scene at the beginning is that it almost felt like it was kind of paying homage to the fight scene in the original Thor, when he's fighting off the Frost Giants, and I love that, so it was radically different in tone, and it felt completely like its own kind of thing, but yeah, it also felt like it was kind of referencing and paying homage all the way back to the original Thor, and I love little things like that, and I think that was really well done. And of course, what I have to say straight off the bat here is that not only is this obviously an awesome, really fun, entertaining Marvel movie, but it's also very much a Taika Waititi film through and through, and I feel like you have to know that going in, because this isn't just another everyday, run-of-the-mill Marvel movie. It is a really fun, awesome Marvel movie. It ticks all the boxes you want from a fun, awesome Marvel movie. But at the same time as being a fun, awesome Marvel movie, it's very much a Taika Waititi film. And I love that. Some people might be put off by that it's not just a straight-up Marvel superhero blockbuster, it's also kind of very much a Taika Waititi film. But me personally, I absolutely love that, and it's what I love about Marvel in general, is that they take risks more so than any other big studio. They take risks on lesser-known directors or indie directors. They gave Joss Whedon the Avengers. James Gunn did Guardians. Shane Black did Iron Man 3. And now again with Taika Waititi doing Thor Ragnarok. They're names you wouldn't expect, or you wouldn't necessarily think about those directors doing those kind of films. But then when you see it, you're like, oh my god, this is just absolutely genius. That was like an inspired move, and Marvel seems to be doing that more than any other big studio out there. You know, we have other studios like, you know, Lucasfilm or Warner Brothers and DC. They seem a little bit scared to kind of think outside the box. But with Marvel, they've become so confident in their brand that they can just take risks with going with these lesser known directors, or giving, you know, opportunities to these directors that any other studio might not have ever even considered. And yet you think it sounds like a ridiculous move, you know. James Gunn doing Guardians of the Galaxy, what the hell is that, you know? But Taika Waititi doing Thor Ragnarok, and then you watch it and you're like, oh my god, that was absolutely amazing. I can't imagine anyone else doing it now but them. And it was just absolutely fantastic. And, you know, it's what I love about Iron Man 3 as well. And granted, not a lot of people loved Iron Man 3, and I feel like even people that didn't love that will still really enjoy Thor Ragnarok. But what I'm trying to say is that even though they're very different films, it kind of reminds me of Iron Man 3 in that Iron Man 3 was not only a really awesome, fun Marvel movie, but it was very much a Shane Black film as well, and I love that. As someone who not only loves Marvel movies, but loves to see these films that have very strong kind of directorial voices behind them, so they feel very kind of striking and different and unique from the kind of the style and the vision that's put forth by the filmmaker. It's not just another average Marvel movie, because as much as I love, say, Age of Ultron, you know, it doesn't really stand out. It's a little bit forgettable. It's not as memorable as like the first Avengers or as Guardians or as the Winter Soldier. But, you know, bringing in someone like Taika Waititi for Thor Ragnarok, it does the same kind of thing as what, you know, Iron Man 3 did for Iron Man. Is that, you know, Iron Man 3 was the closer of that trilogy, but it was very much a Shane Black film, and it was completely different from the previous two, and I loved it because of that. And it was the same kind of thing here. It's a very fun, awesome, entertaining Marvel movie, but it's also very much a Taika Waititi film, and Taika Waititi brings his kind of signature brand of humour into this, and it really helps inject kind of a much needed kind of boost of energy into the Thor universe, which is really cool and crazy and wacky and fun and different. And before this, the Thor films have been a little bit underwhelming, a little bit disappointing. I like the first one, you know, the second one was a little bit of a letdown, but this, it's got so much more energy and so much more kind of dynamism to it than any of the other Thor films, and I loved what Taika Waititi did with bringing that kind of energy into this franchise. You know, some people might say that, oh, Marvel movies are all the same, you know, and I reject that notion entirely. And look, some of them are similar to one another. You know, Age of Ultron was maybe kind of similar to Avengers, but really, when you look at it, Marvel's movies are all so radically different in tone. Like Captain America the Winter Soldier is completely different from Guardians of the Galaxy, which is completely different from Iron Man, which is completely different from Thor Ragnarok. And that's what I love about Marvel, is that they don't just do the same thing over and over again. Sure, some are kind of similar, and there are some recurring elements through a lot of their movies, but on the most part, their films are so radically different in tone, and bringing in new, interesting, different directors has really helped the movies stand out from one another. And by bringing Taika Waititi in for Thor Ragnarok, it was just really great, because he strayed from the Marvel formula. You know, anyone who says, oh, this is just like another Marvel movie, it's exactly the same as what we've seen in many times before, no, it's not. It's so radically different. You know, he strays from the formula, and in doing so, he delivers something so fresh and different. It doesn't just feel like another run-of-the-mill, everyday, average Marvel movie. You know, it delivers everything you want from a Marvel movie, but at the same time, it feels so fresh and different at the same time. Taika Waititi did not play it safe at all. He took risks in a very brave, bold and striking way, to the point where you're watching this film and you can't believe some of the things you're seeing, some of the things that they actually got into a Marvel movie, and I just loved it because of that. It was very brave and bold and striking and different when you think about it, especially on reflection, when you think back on what you watch and you're like, yeah, that was actually very bold, you know, to take the movie in that direction and do something so drastically different. And I really applaud Taika Waititi and Marvel for taking so many risks with this movie and really not playing it safe at all. You know, it's not just a little bit different, it's really different, and they really go for it, they go all in, and I absolutely love the movie for that. And of course, I touched on this already, but with it being a Taika Waititi film, it's also very funny, you know, and it's humour that works. You know, sometimes in Marvel movies, the humour feels a little forced, a little shoehorned in there. You know, as much as I like Doctor Strange, I don't think that movie needed the humour, you know, and Doctor Strange does actually appear in this movie, and his scenes are very kind of straight-laced. You know, there's comedy in the scenes, but it's not Doctor Strange, you know, providing the comedy. You know, it's more Thor bouncing off Doctor Strange, and I really like that. I really like that Doctor Strange was the more kind of serious, straight-faced one against Thor's kind of more kind of goofball, if you will. And Yeah, but for Doctor Strange, for example, I don't think his movie needed the humour. I think that could have been maybe more serious and more darker. But what I loved about how the humour was handled in this film was that, yes, it was very funny, but I didn't feel like it was too much humour. I wouldn't call this film a straight-up comedy, because it's not just characters going around cracking jokes like in a comedy or anything. You know, the humour in this film comes about very naturally from the characters interacting with one another, and it's also comedy that comes about from just the crazy, just bizarre kind of surrealness of just this world and the crazy characters. And what I loved about what Taika Waititi did with the comedy in this film is that it's humour that very much kind of points out how just crazy and nuts and insane everything is, because the Thor universe and the characters that occupy the Thor universe are all very kind of crazy, flamboyant, over-the-top, larger-than-life characters in this insane, bizarre, nuts world. So I love the fact that they have this humour in there that's pointing out how crazy and insane it all is, and it all really works. Like, it feels natural and it fits, doesn't feel out of place. And I think the real strength of this film was that how it expertly balanced the kind of surreal comedy with kind of the serious dramatic moments at the same time. I feel like a lot of people aren't giving the movie credit for that, because yes, it is very funny and entertaining in your face, but it's also got some really great, more serious dramatic moments. And obviously it's not as serious and dramatic as it is kind of funny and entertaining. But what I really liked about what Taika Waititi did with this film is that he expertly balanced the kind of light-hearted comedic moments with the serious, more dramatic moments. It didn't feel like a mishmash in tone at all. In fact, I'd even go as far as to say that, even though I maybe prefer the Marvel movies that are more serious and dramatic, what I loved about this film was that when we did get a moment that was more dramatic, it carried so much more weight to it, because it was in a film that was so much more comedic and light-hearted in tone, that when we did get an occasional serious, more dramatic moment, it was so much more impactful. The movie's just so funny and so comedic and so light-hearted and so entertaining, and we suddenly get a serious, dramatic moment. It's like, whoa. And then no one's laughing in those moments. They really work, and I think they really hit you and provide a really big impact and carry so much more weight, because so much of the rest of the film is so funny. When we do get a serious moment or a really kind of intense moment of drama, it really hits you, and it really worked, at least for me anyway. And of course, I've got to talk about the actors. I mean, all of the actors in the star-studded cast turned in kind of extremely memorable performances in their respective roles. Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie, who really stands out and makes a real kind of strong impression as this kind of former Asgardian warrior. We've got Hulk, and what I loved about how Hulk was used in this film is that, although I've loved the kind of Joss Whedon's take on Hulk, I loved this new interpretation of Hulk and Bruce Banner. It felt much more like a kind of dual personality, you know, it felt much more like two different characters in Banner and Hulk was also kind of fleshed out a whole lot more. He was given like a personality, and he was much more of a character in his own right, and I really liked that. It felt a lot more like Jekyll and Hyde-ish, like two different characters, and it kind of really nailed that kind of dual aspect of the character that the other movies haven't really touched on. Like in the other films, it's like we have Bruce Banner and then he occasionally turns into some kind of raging monster that smashes things. In this, it was very much more like two different characters and two different personalities, much more of a Jekyll and Hyde-ish kind of take on the character, and I actually really liked how they did that. And Mark Ruffalo was great in the movie, and of course Chris Hemsworth, he's always great as Thor, but what I loved about his performance as Thor in this movie is that because he was in this Taika Waititi film, he was given the freedom to inject so much more personality into the character Thor. Like, it was much more of a kind of lively and charismatic performance than we've ever seen from him before, because Chris Hemsworth is a very kind of charismatic, funny guy, but he's never really able to inject much of his own personality into the character before. But he kind of does for Thor in this film what Robert Downey Jr. has always done for Iron Man. Like in past incarnations of Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr. is able to inject kind of parts of his own personality into the character, and Chris Hemsworth is able to do that with the character of Thor in this film. You know, he's much more lively and charismatic and funny, and it works, you know, because it still feels like that same character, but, you know, he's grown, he's evolved, and, you know, he's more accustomed to human ways, because obviously he's been living on Earth the past few years, and the humour from his character very much comes about from his kind of ignorance and his kind of lovable kind of goofballness, you know, him not understanding things, or him, you know, interacting with some of the other characters. And I think it really works, and Chris Hemsworth, I think, delivered probably his best performance yet as the character. You know, it was much more charismatic, much more engaging and entertaining of a performance, and I think he really nailed it. And also, one last thing as far as the actors are concerned, this film also has some of the best and most creative celebrity cameos I think I've ever seen in a movie. It's just in one scene in particular, there's some really great cameos there, and it was done in such a kind of interesting, creative and funny way, so I'd definitely look out for that scene. And in fact, some of the best scenes in this film are character moments, whether comedic or dramatic, and it's what I love about this film. What I love about Marvel movies in general, particularly kind of Joss Whedon's Avengers movies, is that as cool and awesome as all the action is, some of the best, most memorable, most entertaining moments in the film are the scenes where it's just, character moments, where it's characters just talking or characters just bouncing off one another. And that's when you can tell it was a really great, really well written, really well performed, movie. Is that, not only is the action awesome, but the character moments are just as, if not more so, entertaining than all the crazy awesome action. And also, talking about the action, obviously, as great as all the character stuff is in this movie, the film also delivers some really creative and memorable action sequences that play out in very kind of surprising ways. And what I was worried about going in is I was like, maybe there's going to be so much of an emphasis on the humour and the character stuff that the action is going to be pretty underwhelming. But no, the action sequences were really cool in this film. Really kind of creative and different, really kind of kinetic and energetic, and just really awesomely filmed and choreographed, and some of the most memorable action sequences in any Marvel movie, particularly the opening 5 to 10 minute kind of scene there at the beginning. It was just so awesome, and the action sequences throughout the movie, they're just so bold and striking, and they really stick with you, and they're not just forgettable, that they're really kind of memorable sequences that were really cool to watch and were played out in really kind of creative and interesting ways. They weren't just more boring action stuff that we've seen before. So I absolutely loved all the action sequences in this film as well. And talking about the visuals, of course, if you've seen the trailer, this film is absolutely spectacular from a visual standpoint, like a Jack Kirby comic come to life. I mean, it just looks absolutely awesome, and there's so many sequences throughout this film that are just so bold and striking from a visual standpoint. It's almost like a painting, just come to life. It just looks absolutely awesome. And so yeah, this film is not only really great from a writing and performance standpoint, but it looks absolutely spectacular from a visual standpoint as well. However, although I absolutely love this movie, I do have a couple of negatives. Nothing major really, nothing that kind of ruined the film for me or was kind of to the detriment of my enjoyment of the film. But the first is that, although I thought this was a very funny film, not all the humour lands. On the most part, everything works, but there are some times when the humour does fall a little flat, and it's not always kind of firing all cylinders. But as I said, for the most part, everything does work and it is really funny, but there are occasions when it doesn't always land and it does fall a little flat. And also, although Cate Blanchett gave a very memorable and entertaining performance, I think Hela as a villain was rather underused. She wasn't really given that much to do, and her storyline was, I think, by far the weakest part of the film. I like how she was introduced and how it was kind of interwoven with the Thor storyline. And I like how it kind of overlapped towards the end as well. But for the most part in the film, she's just hanging around, not really doing much. It almost felt at times like it was disconnected and was from almost like another film. For the majority of the movie, it's all really fun with Thor on Sakaar and Hulk, and then they kept cutting back to the Hela storyline. Every time they kept cutting back to that, I found myself getting disappointed. Cate Blanchett was really great and delivered a really great, memorable, entertaining performance. She brought that kind of gravitas to the role, where, if it was any other actor, it probably wouldn't have worked. At the same time, her storyline and how she was using the film, I thought, was a little underwhelming. She didn't really get much to do, and her storyline on Asgard was, I think, probably the weakest part of the film. However, overall, on top of being ridiculously entertaining, the film takes risks and goes in very kind of daring new directions. And although not everything works, I have to commend Taika Waititi for not playing it safe at all and doing something so drastically different that, for the most part, hits so much more than it misses. So overall, that wraps up my review of Thor Ragnarok. I absolutely loved this film. It was a really great, really fun, kind of rollicking, kind of sci-fi adventure romp with these awesome space fantasy style visuals meshed with kind of Taika Waititi's signature brand of humour. So much fun. I really enjoyed myself with this film. I have a couple of little issues, although for the most part, I really enjoyed myself with this film and I thought it was thoroughly entertaining. I really loved it, but I did have those couple of little issues. So overall, I'm going to give Thor Ragnarok 4 stars. And there we have it, that wraps up my review of Thor Ragnarok. Have you seen the film yet? And if so, what do you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, if you like this and you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to see more. If you missed my last review, be sure to go ahead and click over here to catch up on my last review of Blade Runner 2049, or perhaps down here to catch up on another one of my recent videos. But with that said, I've been David O'Sullivan. I'll see you next time.